The Legislation and Rules Committee for Tuesday, July 30th, 2024 will now come to order. And please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Present.
Alderman Aldrich.
Present.
Chair Vollmer.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Clark
Present.
Hubbard. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 present. President Green.
Present.
We have 6 present. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Aura. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Aura, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Vollmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 aye votes.
All right. I missed the last. We will take up line item 4, board bills for review. Board bill number 60 is being held by the sponsor. Before we proceed, I am undecided today of whether we will be voting on anything. I am at a crossroads in my mind, staying up most of the night going over all this. These being, things that are supposed to go to the voters. My first intent way back when I was told I would have committee hearings on these, but lets us rubber stamp these and let the voters decide. This is supposed to be an apolitical situation. It has turned into anything but that, because 2 of the biggest changes were nixed by the mayor and the comptroller when it came to getting rid of the board and E&A and eliminating. I think it was misconstrued that we're trying to get rid of a person when we're talking about something that might not take place for 5 or 6 years, and we're trying to work towards the future. So dealing in the situation where it has already been tainted by taking the work of the Charter Commission and eliminating 2 before they even came to this committee, we're left with the others that we are still hearing testimony on at this late date. There are 4 bills being held that we have to have another meeting next week. That we then, if they would come out, have 2 meetings to try and get them and put these on a ballot. If they would come out, the mayor has 20 days to wait and sign these, trying to educate the public in maybe a 5 to 6 week span of what might be 5, 6, or 7 changes to what is a piece of a document that actually rules our city. So I am perplexed as to what to do, because this situation seems very convoluted. It should not be. What we're doing today should have been something, if this was done properly, I believe should have been before us. These meetings should be taking place last March to give us time to work these things out and educate. So I will hear testimony again today. We'll be scheduling a meeting for next week. I am torn whether to take a vote or not today. I am sure that the Charter Commission worked long and hard on all of these, but the fact that the way that was set up was to bypass the Board of Aldermen, which was deemed illegal because by state constitution, anything going through the charter change has to come through the Board of Aldermen, rather than have 8 appointed non-elected officials be changing the very document that rules our city. So as chairman of this committee, we will listen to all the testimony we can today. We'll be having another meeting next week. It will not be Tuesday, as that is election day. I will check with the clerk and see which, hopefully Wednesday works, because I believe we have a full board meeting scheduled next Thursday. So, having been down here quite some time, I believe some of the aldermen I'm serving with were actually in grade school the first year I got elected. I have been through this process before where, yes, we've done all this work, and yes, you want to get it on the ballot, but is it ready to go to the ballot? Some very, very good ideas came out of the Charter Commission's hard work. There are ideas. Whether those ideas are ready to be put and implemented into our charter and voted on, I am not sure. So as we listen to this today, listen to this, because we're having people testifying about something that we might have the public voting on the first week of November to change the fabric of our city. Is it ready? Are these things ready? Are these what we have, our board bills before us? And there is no perfect piece of legislation. I know that for a fact. I've introduced some bad ones in my time, and I've learned from them, and that's why I'm giving you this speech right now. Sometimes it might be to our best to look at these things, take in this information, and then move forward in a more, because you're talking about things that are not going to, if voted on, will not occur next week, next month, next year. These are things that we have time to work out and get right. And if there's a time to get it right, with the state of how our city is now, we owe it to our citizens and to ourselves to get it right. So with that, we will proceed with Board Bill 61. Thank you. Alderman Browning.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee for being here today. Thank you, members of the public, and those who come from our departments to be here today. It's good to see everybody. Before we get started here, as we pull up, there's a presentation that should be in the drive. Would like to get that up on the screen. And while we get that done, I do have two amendments that I'd like to discuss for this bill. The first amendment is addressing a word that was omitted, but it's an important word. It's our alleys, streets, and our city. And the second amendment is simply fixing an error to make sure that somewhere where it says 3 should say 4. So those are two amendments that I would like to have adopted at this time. We can handle them one at a time or both together. It's up to the decision.
Procedure would be to do them one at a time,
Sure thing.
and that's how we will proceed. So please proceed with Amendment Number 1 to Board Bill 61, Committee Substitute. Please proceed.
Okay, as I said, this is editing the page where it lists off the different responsibilities of the Department of Transportation, and we will be simply adding the word alleys because that is something the department currently does, and we'd like to make sure that they still do that even as they transition to a Department of Transportation. So I would ask that to be adopted at this time.
I move that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 61.
Second.
Just clerical committee substitute.
Board Bill number 61, committee substitute, excuse me.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Orion.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Vollmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 6 aye votes.
Or we have a new member, our visiting member with us today, President Green.
I'm so sorry, President Green. We have 6 aye votes.
All right, by your vote, we have adopted Amendment Number 1 to Board Bill 61, Committee Substitute. With that, we will now move to Amendment 2 to Board Bill number 61, Committee Substitute. Please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you. Amendment number 2 is simply replacing the 3 with 4. This was a section that we moved, and we want to make sure that we're referring to it correctly.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt amendment number 2 to Board Bill number 61, committee substitute.
Second, previous row.
Hearing no objection, previous roll, we have now adopted Amendment 2 to Board Bill 61 Committee Substitute. With that, Alderman Browning,
I'm
Please.
sorry, Mr. Varmer,
Sorry?
I want to make sure I'm correct. Is that as a committee substitute, as amended?
it'll be as amended, yes. I was just going to say, but thank you for keeping me in line. I appreciate that. All right, with that, we have adopted these amendments to committee, to number 61 Committee Substitute as amended. Please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you. Well, following up from last week, I wanted to quickly just cover what we talked about and then move on to questions and comment from the public. So just first slide is just establishing what we already discussed, that right now we have a dangerous situation out on our streets, that people are getting hurt, people are getting killed. It's inequitable how it's happening. It's hurting people in communities that can least afford it. And the current streets department is only structured towards the maintenance of our streets. We want to broaden that mission and make sure that we acknowledge that there are multiple ways of getting around this city and that people ought to be able to do it safely. And so with that, we want to change everything with a Department of Transportation. Next slide, please.
Sorry, my writing utensil died.
No worries. A few slides back. Let's review the situation. Okay, so let's review the situation. Right now, there is no department in the city whose responsibility is the safety of people on our streets. It's not BPS, it's not streets, it's not planning all the way off in a different part of the government. Right now, our streets department is mainly structured around pavement and paint. There's not a focus on improving the streets, it's simply maintenance. That's per the 1914 language that has not really been updated since. And right now we have a fragmented funding mechanism in our city that is preventing our streets from being well maintained. We cannot coordinate with the utilities. We do not know what streets are going to get paved next year, and that hurts us. It makes our system inefficient, and it makes our system inequitable. Next slide, please. So we have proposed steps to address that. The first step would be to pass Board Bill 61 Committee Substitute, now as amended, on to send it to voters to decide, is this something they want to see for our city? As we've discussed, that is something that the Charter Commission, the entire intent of that was to have it go forward to the voters of the city. We want to honor that. Our next step would be, if passed, we would transition the Streets Department into a Department of Transportation over a period of 2 years. It's actually more like 2.5 years from the point we're at right now. So plenty of time to do this. In that time, we would pass ordinances to give the new Department of Transportation the funding and the personnel in order to carry out its mission. We're not talking about making any changes without support to back that up. The entire point of this is for this department to have the capacity to actually make our streets safer. And so passing a name change and a mission change is important. That's the first step, but we want to make sure that we really fill this out and make it happen. And then effective July 1st, 2027, the Streets Department would become a Department of Transportation. Next slide, please. So real quick, just wanted to focus on the actual language of the bill. Put this up here. I know it's a lot, but what you see highlighted there in pink is the old language. That's the 1914 language. It refers to the repair, cleaning, maintenance of streets, alleys, bridges, wharves, and levees. And then the collection and disposal of garbage, recycling, and refuse. That's what's in there right now. Everything else on this slide is new, but I highlighted in blue the parts that I really want to focus on, which is that this new Department of Transportation shall have charge of planning for safe travel by persons throughout the city by automobile, bicycle, and other modes of transportation. And then the other part says the planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operation of programs and public improvements related to enhancing and improving the safety of all users of the right-of-way, including pedestrians, bicyclists, and motor vehicle operators. This is so, so important because this is actually updating the language in our charter to recognize that there are more than people and vehicles out on our streets and that their safety matters too. This is the document that guides us, the thing that we want to see this department be. And that is why it is aspirational. And again, this language does not go into effect until July 1st, 2027. Next slide, please. Back one, please. There we go. So this is a slide from the last presentation that we did last week, but I just want to revisit it real quick, understanding that this is really the bread of our sandwich that we're talking about today. The fixins come later. We are going to be trying to make sure that there is continued discussion with the departments. Everything needs to be feasible. That's how we make a difference out on our streets. Then we will have ordinances establishing a planning division within the Department of Transportation, making sure that we can have that paving plan in coordination with the utilities, making sure that we can address the most dangerous areas of our city. We'll have ordinances addressing and reallocating funding to make sure that they have those resources in order to happen. And that includes a reexamination of ward capital. I'm being very honest with everybody because I think that's part of the problem of the system right now and why it is so inequitable. Then there will be ordinances addressing coordination with the utilities, doing traffic calming and sidewalks, talking about accessibility in our city. If we're going to make sure that everyone can get around safely, that especially means people who are disabled. We want to make sure that they can get on and off the sidewalks and that we can comprehensively update the ADA transition plan that we currently have, but is currently not happening like it should because we have these fragmented funding systems in a department that does not address this whole city holistically. Next slide, please. So why now? Well, we're being told to wait. Often we're told to wait. But it's important to remember that inaction has consequences. There are lives at stake. And our current city structure holds us back. We cannot achieve this under our current structure. And you can only look to the current condition of our streets and their danger to see that that is true. And we know that residents have uplifted this as a top priority for our city, whether it's the Rams settlement survey, where this was the second result, people focusing on street safety, or it's the community meetings that we attend where people say, hey, I'm worried about the safety of my kids or myself out on our streets. This is uplifted to us every day. And then the Charter Commission made this as a recommendation, one of the 5 recommendations that they actually carried forward to us. And they passed this one out unanimously, the only one that they passed out unanimously. So this is the time to do this. There is not a better time. And on that note, next slide, please. This has been tried before, many times before. You see a small sampling of articles about different attempts in the past to change the structure of our city. Advocates have been asking for decades for structural change so that we can address the dangerous situation out on our streets. And over again, we have failed to do this, and we end up in the same situation. It's important to note that past efforts in this failed because of various different ways that they tried to do this, and those strategies didn't work. But I am hopeful about this strategy today because I think that unlike past boards, this board is different. This board is full of people who understand that we have a duty to care for our whole city, that the 1914 language governing our streets is just far outdated and does not apply to what we are seeing today. And we see the effects, we hear it from our constituents, that this is something they care about and want put forward. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. I'm just going to end on this note. Demarion Hester, 13 years old, was hit in this intersection a couple weeks ago. What you see here is not a response by the city. This is what is known as tactical urbanism. Some residents went out and they painted a traffic circle in this intersection and used plungers for flex posts with reflective tape on them because they wanted to see something to make this dangerous intersection safer after a kid was hit and very injured by someone who ran the stop sign here. Residents have been complaining that people run the stop sign here a lot. Failure to yield is a major problem in this intersection. But when there was no action by our city, this is what they resorted to. I'm gonna be honest, this is embarrassing for us. It's embarrassing when we have headlines that make it nationally, sometimes internationally, about the state of our streets. People won't want to move to our city, much less visit here, if they feel like they might not make it home at the end of the day. It shouldn't have to be this way. So I ask you to take this first step with me today. I want to make sure that we're making our streets safer for everyone. And with that, I will hand it off to Director Williams, who I've asked to come here today to speak her concerns and address any questions that you might have.
That is fine, but do we now, in public infrastructure utilities, isn't there a complete streets bill we're working on? Does that address many of these things we're talking about, Alderman?
That's a great question. So the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee and the full board recently passed a Complete Streets update. The Complete Streets update is a policy. It is not structure. It addresses how projects should be handled when they exceed $500,000. That does not apply to small traffic calming efforts. That does not apply to our paving of our streets. It does not apply to making sure that the results are going to be funded even. It was simply a policy to make sure that when we take action through efforts in our current system and our future system, if we choose to move forward with this, that they will go through a process that will have more engagement, that they'll have benchmarks to measure against, and that we, over time, improve our streets. But it will not do anything to solve the funding problem we have right now. It will not do anything to solve the structural issue that our street department is currently only focused on maintenance.
All right, thank you very much. With that, Director Williams, please take the podium. For the record, I believe I have to swear you in. You swear that what you're going to say today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Okay, please state your name for the record. Make sure the green light is on the microphone.
Testing.
Sometimes when people pick up, you have to speak closer to that. State your name and please proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on Board Bill 61. My name is Bethany Williams, the current Director of Streets for the City of St. Louis. Board Bill 61 is more than a name change from the Department of Streets to the Department of Transportation. Per the current charter, as we just heard, the Department of Streets is designed to repair, clean, and maintain our current transportation infrastructure. This board bill will add functions, the planning, engineering, and design of our transportation needs to facilitate all modes of transportation for our residents and visitors to our city. This board bill does not speak to a strategic plan, budget, or the people that it will take to develop a Department of Transportation. In other cities that have taken these steps to make this change in their structure of city departments, 3 key objectives have been done before a board bill of this sort has come forward: planning, budget, and the people. So the things that we heard today, the steps that to support the change, the road ahead, these are all things that should be done prior to a board bill of this nature. I want to speak to the planning. As safe travel of all citizens is a priority for this administration, we have taken time to identify and move within the current department structures of BPS, planning, and streets. Board Bill 120 appropriated $1.2 million of ARPA dollars to develop a the city's first citywide mobility and transportation plan. The Streets Department has created a position for a bike and ped coordinator for the city. This will allow us to do more work and speak to what the residents are wanting in our city. Asset management is something that we all need. Everything has a life expectancy. Our pavements, our dumpsters, our street lights, our pavement markers, and our signs. We are working to become a more proactive department that knows the historical knowledge of our assets. This will allow us to plan as well as budget better as a city and a department moving forward. Speaking to the budget, our current budget structure does not allow for funding for the Streets Department for us to perform annual basic duties that citizens require. I'm speaking of paving, dumpster replacement, and asset management. With the current structure, Our Department of Transportation will stay the same and deliver the same level of service to our citizens, heavy on being reactive and less on focusing on being proactive in delivering our services. The Streets Department needs an annual allocation of funding in the sums of $12 million for paving, 1.8 for dumpster replacement, as well as traffic optimization. Now let's talk about the people. Currently, we have 335 employees that span from boots on the ground to management. Our TO allows for 453 employees, which means I am 118 employees short in the department. We currently are having issues filling engineering positions. We have a traffic engineer position that has sat on the board for 2+ years with no applicants. For example, we currently have a bike and ped coordinator position. 8 people applied and only 1 met the minimum qualifications. We must have qualified and skilled people to do the work of a Department of Transportation. These are the types of employees that we need when we're looking to add the functions of planning, engineering, and design to this department. With the current pay structure of engineers and planners, this will not change with a name change of the department. Currently, we are paying a $58,000 plus starting for a traffic engineer. Industry is roughly paying $95,000 to a starting engineer. In closing, under the current structure, the Department of Streets works hand in hand with BPS and planning to facilitate the city's transportation needs. The timing of Board Bill 61 is a little premature, knowing that we've spent $1.2 million on a citywide mobility transportation plan, as well as the Department of Personnel is doing a class and compensation study at this time. I feel once the results of the citywide mobility and transportation plan and the compensation study are shared with the city, we will be able to dig into the needs so that we can support a board bill and develop a transportation department if needed. I think the timing is what the issue is at this time. Thank you for this opportunity, and we work hard to facilitate the transportation needs of the citizens of St. Louis.
Thank you, Madam Director. If you hold a minute, I'll see if any members of the committee have questions for you. Alderman Cohn, are you joining us up here, or are you? All right, that'd be nice of you. Thank you, sir. We have a nameplate made for you and everything. I just needed someone to make room for. All right. Do we have any questions of the sponsor, sir?
Are you going through the list versus calling everyone out like last time?
Well, I was somewhere seniority still exists in my mind, so that's how I do things.
Last week, you were just asking the whole group.
We did it alphabetically by height last week.
Thank you, Director Williams, for being here. That is a lovely brooch. I have one that's similar to it. I appreciate you being here, and this is a bill that very much in theory I support. I think many of us do, and it's something that I think your remarks really highlighted where I'm challenged with the bill. This is something that when we restructured the State Department of Transportation, formerly now known as MoDOT, Missouri Department of Transportation, it used to be called Missouri Department of Highways. If you go down to Jefferson City, the building that they're housed in literally still says Department of Highways on the outside of it. They might have some brand new signs at the entryway that say Department of Transportation, but you can see how far they really went to transform that department from Department of Highways to Department of Transportation. They literally slapped a sticker on it and called it something new, and 90+% of their funds probably still go to highways versus public transit. I think Missouri is one of the lowest in the nation in terms of funding public transit opportunities. It's a sad testament to our state And I would just really hate to make the same error here in our city where I know so many of us care about transit as a whole, whether that's, automobiles, public transit, light rail, cyclists. I rode my golf cart in this morning in this afternoon. Gravois is looking particularly treacherous today. But, and I think I sent you a note about a couple streets that I was on. But I think where I'm really challenged and what I would like your help here, this is, in essence, the bill is just changing the name of the department. It's not reallocating resources. It's not touching ward capital. It's not taking personnel from BPS or streets or the planning department. It's literally just changing the name. And so I'm just wondering like how that might relate to your position on the bill. Because it sounds as though many of the things that you brought up are real and they're legitimate, and they're concerns that I have about a future department, whatever that might look like. But right now, it's literally just changing the name of the streets department to the Department of Transportation.
So, and thank you for that question. And we have to wear our matching brooches one day.
We'll coordinate
But, okay. But speaking to, it's more than just a name change. When I read through here and I look at some of the additional functions that have been added, and you're talking about planning, and you're talking about the engineering and the design functions of some of the work to facilitate all modes of transportation, that is a change, and that's more than just name change. And when I say that, is because we currently, within the streets department, do not have those functions. We work with BPS, we work with planning that do the engineering work for us, and then what we can within maintenance staff, we're able to do some things in making small changes, but most things go out to contract. So we still will be looking at a contract process, even if we were to change the name and add more people. Where are these people going to come from that's going to do this work? Say it's July 1st, 2027, and now the expectation, well, I would hope, and I would start if it's me, before then, making the transition and the change, but where will we get those people from? We're seeing some of the same problems and issues with hiring some of these key staff members that will deliver these objectives to the Department of Transportation or to the Streets Department. I don't think the expectation is that these people will just come from BPS and start working on transportation alone. They have other things, other duties that they oversee that we will be pulling those people away from. So not just, I speak from the Department of Streets standpoint, but I think that this has a larger, impact on our city and who handles our engineering of our city. And so I think those are things that need to be done prior to making a change. And I will say, since this has come about, I heard grapevine through the Charter Commission. I finally was able to speak to the Charter Commission on this, but as well as sharing in conversations with some of the alders, I've been researching other cities that have done this work. And most of the cities that have done this type of work, they had strategic planning in place before they came to the citizens and said, let's change the name. And this is why we support changing the name. So that is why I'm not saying that we don't have areas that we need to improve as a city and as a transportation, as the streets department as a whole. I think that's where we're at the place now of having a mobility plan. When I first started, a citywide mobility plan was where to be found. We were designing and planning block by block, block by block by block, instead of looking at something on a holistic standpoint. And that's what the transportation plan will deliver for us. I think we've invested the funds, and it's just about waiting to make sure that we see and allow that process to run its course. And then I am committed to making what changes that are needed. But I think a plan needs to be in place before we make a change of this magnitude.
Okay, thank you. I do touched a little bit on this in your remarks. Can you just, brass tacks, how many people do we have striping streets? So crosswalks,
So currently, I have 2 crews. That's a crews of 3 to 4 people that work per crew. 9 times out of 10, we have 1 striper that's out, and you have a crew that will go and set up, make sure all the, do handwork, things of that nature, and then you have a striping crew that will go out. The crews, we are seeing a shortfall. Like I said, we have 118 vacancies in the department. We have literally 2 people hanging street signs in the city at this time.
that was my next question.
Yes, when we look at pothole patching, the city's just started this initiative, and we have potholes out of the wazoo that are coming in that need to be filled. And I literally have 2 crews on a good day that are filling potholes.
So we have 2 crews doing striping. We'll say 20% of them are out on any given day. We've got 2 people who are hanging signs across the city. I've asked this question before, so it shouldn't be, news to any of my colleagues, but how many miles of street does the city of St. Louis have?
I can't tell you that right off the top of my head.
It's around 1,000 miles
Yeah,
of street.
yeah, miles of street,
And
yeah.
that does not include alleyways.
No.
That's literally just our city streets, and it doesn't include MoDOT streets either. So that's city streets. We've got 1,000 miles of them. We have 2 crews doing striping. People ask why we can't have crosswalks on our residential streets. There's your answer. It's not because it's called the street department. It's not because it's, mismanaged. It's because we don't have adequate staffing in that department to do the work that's necessary that impacts people on our streets every single day. I have literally had multiple requests from neighbors to replace street signs that are missing. Not stop signs. Those get replaced fairly quickly. And when I say that, I mean within a month. I'm talking about the names of streets. People have no idea what street they're even driving down in St. Louis sometimes because we don't have the capacity to put up a street sign. Downtown, which we all get feedback from folks on Twitter and our mailbox everywhere else about, streets downtown. Alderman Ogilvie, I think I saw him earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here. Former Alderman Ogilvie. He and I, had the great pleasure of working with the Slay administration on City Arch River and the lid over the highway. And we were literally pushing to have the highway removed from downtown, maintaining the connection of Washington Avenue from the river to the city limits like it had been since the founding of our city. The maze that is downtown with all of the one-way streets that we don't even have one-way directional signage in place for that. I myself and I have literally turned down, I've lived here my whole life, and I have driven down the wrong side of the street in downtown because we don't have signs up. We don't even have signs up. That is a budgetary issue, that's an operational issue, that's a personnel issue. It does not matter what the name of the department is. If we are not fixing those issues, those dynamics will not change. And that is really where I struggle with this. And I understand the sponsor and their intent to move things forward and changing the name. Having, and this is where I'm struggling a little bit as well. I hear you with respect to the planning and other functions that are listed in the board bill. But also in the charter, we have a Department of Hospitals.
Mhm.
We don't have hospitals. We have a Department of Welfare. We don't have anyone in that department hired into that department anywhere in city government. It becomes basically a, unfunded mandate that we have just sitting on our books. And I really do get challenged with that when we don't have the mechanisms in place, and to your point, the strategic plan to move forward. So I'm asking these questions and making these comments because I really am very much on the fence with this today. I lean in favor of it because I really don't think it's going to change much, but hopefully it does change the conversation, which I think the alderman from the 9th Ward is trying to do. And I don't think that that's necessarily a slight on you or your department or the capacity that you have, although we do need to improve that. But I don't think that that's any secret to you. I just think that this is something that we need to really continue to put our energy and resources into making our streets safer and better. But we need to call out how we do that as well. Because whether or not this passes here at committee, passes the full Board of Aldermen, passes the voters, with their, 60% threshold, we still need to do better on our city streets, and we need to get those basics done. And so we really need to have conversations around how do we make that work. And so I do appreciate you being here today and sharing your remarks, and look forward to the other questions and comments and deliberation from my colleagues.
Thank you so much. And I can just say that's why we're looking at asset management. How do we know how much paving we have, or street striping, pavement markings we have? How do we know the life expectancy and the lifeline of our signals and things of that nature that we should just know as a department, and then we're able to budget more proactively. If this has 5-year life expectancy, 5 years, I should be planning to replace that. And so that's where I want to get us to as a department, but it just takes time for us to get there because we're strapped to be reactive and less proactive in our department at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Ryan, any questions of the director?
Thank you, Chairman Vollmer. Thank you for being here today. I think, as Alderman Cohn referenced, I think that part of the reasoning behind this and why this came out of the commission is just frustration with the way that streets has worked for quite some time now, and that's not a slight on you in any way. I think that the ward capital system of funding streets is a deeply flawed way of funding streets. I think it makes it practically impossible for you guys to plan ahead. And I've said it 1,000 times before. You mentioned being understaffed. I think that there's certainly some things that we could look at that don't go to staffing, but every department is so understaffed that it's going to take time to get crosswalks done, signs hung, and roads repaved, potholes fixed. I think that this is just a result of years and years of frustration with the status quo with streets, and I do think that something needs to change there. I'm not sure what exactly, but I think that this is absolutely just a result of years of things piling up. And thank you for your testimony here today.
Thank you. And I do believe in my first 2 years here, I did a lot of community meetings and listening to residents, open door policy, employees just come in. I do my work late at night so I can listen to them during the day. And I've learned that this stems, and a lot of things that we're doing stems from frustration. And it's not only frustration from the residents, but you have a group of employees that are very proudful. They enjoy and they love and they're proud to be city employees. And what we're dealing with now because of numbers and budget and shortages, it takes a hit on them as well. And so I understand the level of frustration, and that's why we're trying to figure out how do we take a different approach to be more proactive in our dealings and less reactive in how we do business.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alderman. With that, we'll move on to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Director Williams. My comments, I just want to say that I agree with the frustration. I also agree that sometimes the frustration is misdirected, right? And so we know that this bill goes out of committee and then passes at the ballot box, that wouldn't change the things that you brought up today or many other things that were brought up in presentations. I have a good relationship with you all that I'm proud of because I built it since I've been here for 6 years. Even before you were the director, your staff has always been respectful and responsive in work that clearly, as the alderperson, I don't have any background in streets. So when I reach out to Jamie, when I reach out to Mr. Wilson, when I reach out to Mr. Flake, all of them respond, and then I follow the directives, and then I work with BPS. I'm saying that to say, I understand the process now. It's frustrating, but it is the process, and the things that we are saying that are going to change, I don't know that they will change just from this right here. I fully understand it. I also fully understand, even as late as last night, I got calls from my constituents that want this to happen. They do want this process. They do want this, what they perceive, rather, to be what this is going to mean to how the streets department will become this transportation department. I want to ask you, as director, between now and if it passes in November and 2027, what does that mean? What would that look like for you? What do you believe your role would be in now the formation or the creation of this transportation department?
So what my role will be in this transition to a transportation department, really focusing on the people first, making sure we identify the job titles that are needed, making sure that we have the qualified people, working with personnel on minimum job requirements to see what do we really need in employees so that they can be successful, developing some type of mentor situation for these new employees to come learn city government really quickly, as well as doing their job duties that will change really fast. Really nurturing, figuring out where these people are going to sit. You know, where we, at 1900 Hampton, we're to capacity at this time now. So identifying facilities will make a major thing, and then really working with Paul Payne on the budget. Really working with Paul Payne as well as the Board of Aldermen to identify how do we get annual budget funds to the streets department. That will be really my #1 priority, because when you have budget and you have a plan, then that equals accountability. And so that is where I want to get, where we have a budgeted line item for these items that residents want to see, residents need. These are the things that residents need on a daily basis to get to their jobs, to get to the store, to get to school, all modes of transportation. I believe when I first applied for area engineered MoDOT, that was my goal, was making sure all modes of transportation were met by the department. So any projects that came into the department had to facilitate ADA compliance. Looking at bike paths for more than one use, not just for fitness and working out, but that mother that needs to get her child to school or to get to that job. Functions of different modes of transportation, they have different meanings to different people. And making sure that residents as well as the alders understand we have to facilitate those needs. So my first priority will be the budget, making sure that we had itemized funding available. And second will be the people, making sure we had the people that could take over and do these duties. And then really working on the staff, making sure they're motivated and willing to stay and support this vision change.
And as director, do you feel like this timeline is something that you could ideally accomplish within that timeline? If you like, do you think between now, if it passed in November, and 2027, that you would be able to accomplish those that you just noted, that you would be your priorities?
So I would say no to that. And I think if we had more time, one, allowing us to review and see what the mobility and transportation study will give us, as well as working with personnel in the compensation study. Those two pieces will give us the tools that we can go out and we can recruit engineers at market value or government market value, because we do know that's different from private sector. But we will have more marketing tools, and we will have the tools that we need in order to go out and provide these services. So that's what will take priority.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for answering my questions, and I might have a few more afterwards, Mr. Chairman, but I'm going to yield for now.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman Aldridge, any questions of the director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for being here, Director. I don't have one in Broaches, but apparently I need to become part of the club because it definitely looks nice. First and foremost, I want to thank you and all your commissioners at each division, from streets to refuse to the other two that's not popping in my head right now, but each commissioner for the work that they do. Like Alderwoman Clark Hubbard said, you know, I also don't have like a degree in engineering, but between your department and a huge credit to the mayor's office, director of operations, when there's stuff or needing to know where to go to, especially being a new alder, like who do I call for this? You guys have been helpful to be able to assist. And now it doesn't get done as quick as possible. As we know, nothing in government is fast. But I do know you guys try to get to it as soon as possible, understanding that there are other requests and things that have been put in. So I appreciate your leadership and your team leadership on this. But to the legislation, because I just want to make sure when we're talking about these pieces of legislation, there's been a lot of things. I think as the chair has started this hearing, a lot of things have been said outside of this process from either department heads or electeds on the certain piece of legislation, and they kind of get misscrewed of what's in it. So I also want to echo the alderman from the 3rd Ward of this legislation, the way that I read it, and I'm on page 2, doesn't really do much when it comes to changing the department. So on page 2, line, starting, I would say, line 2, going all the way down to about, I'll just say line 8, it talks about the effective date, which is July 1, 2027, and it says that the Department of Streets shall be known and become the Department of Transportation. So that is where it sets up the name change. Once you get further down to line 17, it says said department shall have divisions established by the head of the department, which would be you, if this is passed, or by ordinance. So it doesn't, and I continue to read on in the legislation if it sets up certain divisions, but in this legislation, only thing that it is currently doing, if passed, would change the name, but it would also give the ability for yourself as a director or by ordinance. And I think we work very closely. I know we just got done with Complete Streets, and that didn't happen in one session as much as, you know, we wanted to. It was a lot of negotiation, a lot of conversations, a lot of collaboration between the alders and said government branches to make sure it was right. Because when it first started, the branches wasn't in favor, and then you have those conversations to get there. But if I'm correct, and please, if I'm missing something from when you didn't read the bill, where it says that there will be other departments set up forced by this legislation. I think the only force is a name change and an avenue for either yourself or ordinance would be the Board of Aldermen, or if it came from the mayor's office, a bill to change or add a division or change divisions. Am I reading that differently from?
So yes, I don't think that the divisions will change. I think that the divisions that we currently have will remain the same. I feel like when I first read this, and I was able to speak to the Charter Commission, that was one of the things that I pointed out was, what about our other divisions that are not listed here? You know, this pretty much talks about street maintenance and it talks about refuse, but it doesn't speak to city tow and all of this. But then when I reread, I'm like, okay, that's where, in that language is where those other duties would fall into play. I think that the major sticking point here is the level of engineering skill that will be introduced to this department. That's the piece that is missing. That's the planning, the design, and the engineering that we currently do not do. Those functions are delivered through BPS and through planning. And construction, which then comes from contract work that's being done. So those will all now be added. The expectation is, say you have traffic calming, and you come to me and you say, we want traffic calming in our ward. This is the plan. We want you to study it. We would have to study it. We would have to identify, engineeringly, what's the best fit, what's the best product that we will put in place, as well as go out for bid to contract the work, because currently we don't have the staff to do new construction. We just maintain and maintain what's already out here in the street, what has already been designed and through planning and BPS. So those are additional functions that will have to come to the department, and now we will be responsible for doing that level of work. So that's where I speak to the addition to the functions of the department. I think when we look at maintenance of all of these items that we currently see and all of our divisions that we currently see, none of that will change. It's mainly the maintenance or the engineering, the design, and the planning piece that will be added to this department. And because of that, and even if we said you take planners or you take engineers from BPS and bring them over to the Department of Transportation to do these functions, what about their other duties that they do for parks and building, for the building division? And I don't know what all Rich Bradley team is responsible for, but who's going to be responsible for those duties at that point? So it's just more of a trickle down effect that I just think if we look at a strategic plan, and even like I've said to Alderman Browning, I'm not saying that this is something that is not needed in the future. I just think that the timing of it, and if we were to have more time to allow two things to happen. Two things. One, the compensation study that personnel is doing. This will evaluate our job titles as well as the salary of all of our titles and tell us if we're paying employees properly. That's one. That will give us a point where we will be able to go and recruit quality engineers to come in and do this design work that we're requesting. And two, the mobility plan for the city.
So, and thank you for that, Director. Where in the legislation, maybe it's in that section 2, where it says there's going to be, I guess, that additional engineers, that are you pointing to it as saying the qualification of certain members, not necessarily the department, but the people that's hired? Because
So
I'm not,
go ahead.
I'm trying to figure out where, the way that I read it again, it doesn't say there would be like a new department added. It does say, I guess, section B, certain qualifications, maybe instead of shall, maybe a may, to give wiggle room that the president of the board and the president of the board and the directors shall be engineer of training, 10 years experience, and the rest of it. Is that?
So if you look at page 3 of 5, section 13D, I want to say, or D, section 13, it speaks to the additional responsibilities of the department. So if you look at a couple things here, if you look at public transit authorities, if you look at bridges, if you look at public transit again, if you look at the operations, not the operations, but the design of how we move as a city. Those things are now currently done by other departments. So those will be additional functions added to the streets department or the Department of Transportation. Thank you, Scott.
Okay. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Does that conclude? All right, thank you, Alderman. Vice Chair Velazquez, any questions of the director?
Yes, thank you, Director Williams, for being here and answering all of our questions. I think Alderman Narayan summed up a lot of my feelings directly. I think that there's just a lot of frustration with how things are, both, I think, internally on the city side and of course with residents. So I just have a few questions. And I'm super excited about the TMP, and I know that residents in my ward, once they found out about it, shared it on social and are really looking forward to the results. But do you know when that will be done approximately?
If I could have Scott, his office is manning that. He can come and speak to that.
Send your bicycle, will you approach the dais, please? I'll have to swear you in, sir. You swear the testimony you will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Scott Ogilvie. I work in the city's Planning and Urban Design Agency. Thank you for the question, Alderwoman. Transportation mobility plan should wrap up late summer next year, let's say roughly August.
So August 2025?
Correct.
Okay. That's actually the only part I have. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And then Director Williams, I know that you referenced the personnel department study, the compensation study. When will that be complete by?
So I'm not for sure of that date. I just had my initial calls, I think, like the end of last week, to pull employees together for them to do employee surveys and get information about different job duties. I'm not for sure, Director, or that's a question for the Director of Personnel.
I think that would be helpful for this committee and for the board to know. I mean, certainly, what I hear, and please let me know if I understand your position correctly, but the idea of the Department of Transportation is a good one. The timing is just not quite right in your mind.
I think that our current structure with BPS and planning and the streets department will work if we have tools in place for accountability. And then if we see that those things do not work, then we move to a Department of Transportation or some different type of structure. My issue now is we currently have no accountability plan piece in place to guide us in our job functions, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I think, so this is just, my take on it. I mean, I think a lot of residents don't necessarily know the difference between what is the streets department's responsibility, what is the Bureau of Public Works responsibility, what is, we get calls obviously for, a multitude of things, and they don't really care whose job it is, they just want it done. And I think that some of the frustration that Alderman Narayan described is, an aggregate of years and years of just wanting things to get done and it not happening. I mean, one of the other questions I have, and I know this is more of a BPS question, but we do currently outsource all the engineering, right? All the planning and the engineering.
I'm going to say that
for the streets,
no.
or most of it.
We do some, but I know that Rich's team, they do design work as well in-house and planning. Well, he's here, he can speak for planning. But we do have consultant work. I don't want to make it seem as if all of our work is done in-house, but we do in-house design work as well.
Mr. Ogilvie, do you have an idea of how much, like, the percentage of engineering and design work that is currently being consulted or
St. Louis,
contracted out?
It follows a model that's very similar to most municipalities, in that kind of the detailed engineering is largely done by consultants, but it is managed by engineers on staff. So they are managing, sometimes in a pretty hands-on way, the work of those third-party engineering firms who are doing work. And that's just a very typical way for any city to operate now. I do think the expertise that is currently on staff, or the experience that's currently on staff in managing those contractors, is important, and it's not a skill people have on day one. And those engineering firms are doing sometimes very complex engineering, like bridge design and subsurface design of utilities and all these things. And so that's generally not going to be expertise most cities ever have on staff anymore. In terms of planning, I think the function is very comparable. But, working in planning, you see the manager of a project in-house is extremely important. And so I don't want to undersell that set of skills, managing and helping a contractor consultant interface with the city is a key project management skill, and that's something that takes time to develop, I think, and isn't necessarily there with a new hire. And I think maybe to just go a little further, within BPS, there's engineers managing planning, right? Grant applications. There's engineers managing design, also managing, the public engagement process around that design. There's engineers managing construction itself, bidding. The in the field construction management is an engineering function, and the city has people out, side by side with contractors monitoring work as it happens. And so there are a number of important engineering functions that exist through different divisions of the Board of Public Service. But the Board of Public Service is not itself like an architecture and engineering firm, right? So I think that's the distinction. But those jobs need to be done both on a practical basis and I think many times on a legal basis by registered engineers.
Thank you. I think just the one further comment, I think to echo some of my colleagues, I think what Alderman Browning has proposed, and again, this was a charter commission, is to allow some flexibility in the creation and implementation of it. But I think the idea of, I don't want to say aspirational. I think your shared vision, and I think the city has a shared vision that we want to modernize, do things. And I think the goal of this legislation, I don't obviously want to speak for Alderman Browning, is to allow some flexibility in the implementation and creation of it, but ultimately seeing that certainly you don't want aldermen creating traffic calming measures, which is what you have now, right? I'm not an engineer. I've never will be an engineer, which is not, my dad was an engineer, so that's probably why I don't want to be one. But no, I mean, all kidding aside, I think what people want is modernization and some cohesion, and knowing that experts, not just somebody who said, hey, I heard about a bump out, we can put one there, once went on the street. And I think that having a guide or a model, at least say this is where we're going to go, is I think in the spirit of this legislation, I would say in the spirit of addressing some of that decades-long frustration that's been brewing before you and I were here. So I have no further comments. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. Madam President, since you were on the committee today, would you have any questions or comments of the director?
No questions or comments. I think my colleagues here asked everything that I was planning to ask. I do have some overall comments on the bill, but I will hold those until Alderman Browning comes back up.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Madam Director, first of all, thank you for using the term out the wazoo. I haven't heard it on for a while. It's nice to get back to comments. I love that. But in hearing all this, because yes, currently the way things are done, when you have aldermen deciding what streets get paved and how to do things, you don't want administrative decisions being made by elected officials. That's not really the best recipe for success, but that's what we have. And this, I believe, can help do that. And what I'm hearing is that, and maybe there might be a simple answer, maybe moving from 2027 to 2029 or 2030, would that give you the time to do this? If we could amend this and change that time frame to make this something that, of all the things I've read through and gone through, this attacks many things that are necessary. And I think maybe giving you another 2 years, maybe this could be instituted properly, and this is something that could be a workable thing for the voters to look at. Would that be something you would consider if we could amend it that way? If the sponsor is amenable to amending it.
Yes. So I do believe that more time, and that would allow us time to do those 3 key things that I focused on, that I haven't wavered from or changed in any time I've spoke on this board bill. More time will give us that,
Okay.
and be able to evaluate if this is the best route for the city.
Okay, if you're amenable to that, then I would let the sponsor consider that as an amendment. Seeing as we're probably going to be here next Wednesday at 2 o'clock, the clerk has texted me saying that he has that time available. And maybe we can work on that and maybe get this in a situation that all parties are happy with. So I have no further need for you at this point, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you for bringing Mr. Ogilvy with you. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Our pleasure. With that, Alderman, you can close today. We can leave this open and attack it next week. What are your decision? And you have any more speakers?
We have some public speakers here.
Please, if you would.
We have Mr. Hayden Clement.
All right, sir, what I'll ask you to do is please raise your right hand first. You swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear the testimony I'm about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
All right, thank you. You might want to hold the mic. You're a little taller than everyone else. You're welcome to hold the microphone in your hand if you like. Please state your name for the record, and we will give you 3 minutes to state your case.
Okay. My name is Hayden Clements. I think it is important that the city provides for a department, a centralized department of transportation in the city charter in order to create a plan to maintain streets in an expedient fashion and also create traffic calming measures in a proactive way to prevent, further harm caused to pedestrians and cyclists. And to have this in a centralized department, I think would be all these duties that are split up between different departments currently in a centralized department would be beneficial because, whenever someone has a problem with the way streets currently are, they know it's in one department. It's easier for voters to understand. It's also many of our sidewalks and pedestrian pathways currently are neglected and are difficult for pedestrians and people using mobility assisting devices like wheelchairs and crutches to use. I think future bills should create provisions for more funding for this department, for creating planning and for future employees. Yes.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Minute and a half, it goes as fast. Any other speakers?
Yes, we have Mr. Charles Bryson.
Mr. Bryson, please approach the dais. Raise your right hand, sir. That's your other right hand. Thank you very much. You swear the testimony you give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir.
I do.
State your name for the record, and please proceed. We'll give you 3 minutes and 2 seconds. That's seniority.
TrailNet. I'm sorry, my name is Charles Bryson. I am TrailNet and representing them today. It appears that there's some, I don't want to say confusion, around what is intended in the charter provision before you. So let me try to make it clear. And to some degree, whoever said that this is simply a change of names is both correct and widely incorrect. What Alderman Browning had before you last week and continues to present are two things. Number one, a name change to Department of Transportation, and whomever wants to be part of that department has that right and opportunity. The second is planning over the next 2.5 years to provide the resources necessary to add a planning, to add a construction, to add other personnel that might be necessary to have a full-blown Department of Transportation. Whoever suggested that you have to have a planning department, BPS, and a streets department to maintain our streets and sidewalks to plan for our future doesn't really know what a transportation department is capable of doing. I think you all here, when you go back to your constituents, when you go back to the residents in your wards and neighborhoods, and you say, I'm strongly considering a Department of Transportation that over time will have planning, will have any type of traffic calming and exam, that will have construction, that will have maintenance, that will have engineering, that will have all the aspects related to what goes on in our streets and sidewalks. They would applaud that. And you all know that. And that's the difficulty you're sitting in today. And I understand that. But I would strongly encourage Alderman Browning and each one of you here to stay the course. You all have selected to hear a July 1st, 2027 target date for a Department of Transportation. I urge you, ask your voters, ask the people who don't vote in your wards and neighborhoods, how would you feel if the city had a Department of Transportation where you could call one department and get your answers met? Not today, not tonight, not next week, but as of July 1st, 2027. And each one of you would tell me, yes, people in my ward, people in my neighborhood, that's what they want. That's what I encourage you all to do. Thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry. I'll answer any questions you might have, Chairman.
No questions. I don't believe anyone has questions. Thank you for your remarks. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Scott Ogilvy.
All right. Remember, you're still on the road, sir, and now you're on the clock now that you're not with the director. You're on your
Yes,
own.
I signed up late. Try to keep my remarks brief. Thank you. There is, obviously, there is a lot to say on this subject. It's a little bit hard to know where to focus. So I think the thing I want to jump to is that should this change happen, we want to set today's Department of Streets up for success. We don't want a Department of Transportation that does not have the capacity to do the things that the charter would require it to do, which is, and the responsibilities in this bill, in this charter amendment, significantly increase the important responsibilities of that department. Things like transit planning, things like bridge maintenance and engineering, things like ownership of public transit is mentioned here. So I think that as a staff person, I think we cannot emphasize enough how challenging it may be to hire the people into this department necessary to perform these functions. Today, both the Board of Public Service and the Department of Streets face the same challenges in hiring qualified engineers or any engineers to do the work that we all, I think, 100% have consensus that we want to be doing as a city. And we do have a core team of people in the Board of Public Service who are very experienced, who are managing today dramatically more transportation projects than they were 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. I did the numbers this morning. The dollars going through BPS, the BPS is administering today 5, 6, 7 times as much transportation spending getting out the door in the next couple of years as was typical a few years ago. All of that, all of it with a safety, with a multimodal, with an accessibility focus, 100% across the board. So I think everybody hears the desire, the necessity for change. I don't think Director Williams was saying everything should remain frozen just as it is today. I think city staff wants change. I think the Board of Aldermen wants change. The public wants change. But we don't want to deliver a product that the department can't fulfill because they haven't had the capacity and the systems built to fulfill that mission. Alderman Browning is correct. The stakes are high. And so the idea that there'll be one place you can go to and get answered all your questions, the answer might just be no if the department doesn't have the staff to, apply for grants, doesn't have the staff to administer those grants, which is a big job, federal grants. Doesn't have the staff to design those projects. Doesn't have the staff to respond to residents. And we cannot expect that every city employee currently in those positions just moves into this department. That will not happen. And so they will have to hire quite a few new people. We don't know exactly how much because we haven't done that assessment. We don't know those positions, they'll need to be filled. But it's in the tens of engineers, certainly. And it'll be a struggle to hire those people. So, from my perspective, we are moving in this direction already, in a sense, of doing the transportation mobility plan. The transportation mobility plan sets a mission, sets values, sets goals for the mobility system we as a community want. And then I think we think about how do we achieve those goals? What is the best structure to achieve the goals identified in the TMP? This could be one structure. I don't know that we have assessed all the potential structures the way to get there. Some of the best project delivery in the United States is done by public works departments. Look at Minneapolis. They have a public works department with a transportation division embedded in it, and they have a great program. Some of the best projects in the country. So I just want to emphasize this is a big change. A lot of the things Alderman Browning said would have to happen to make this work. There's a little anxiety on the staff part because we don't know if those things will happen. We don't know if that funding will come. We don't know if those policy changes will come. And I don't want us to be here 3 years from now and say, how come none of the dollars are getting out the door? How come none of the projects are getting built? How come we don't know how to permit the Green Line with Bi-State, if that gets funded? Because we've jumbled up the department roles and responsibilities right in the middle of this very intense period of planning and project delivery that we are currently in. Time could help. Waiting for the TMP to be finished could help, and assessing the best route to meet the goals established by the TMP could help. Just figuring out the staff that the department will need in advance of this would help. The staff, the funding, it will be millions of dollars to stand this department up. Where will these people work? We don't know that today. So these are I know those sound like trivial things, but Director Williams can't interview a planner and say, you're working next to the rack of carburetors in the back of the streets department today. So there is a way to go through, nose to tail, what all the needs of that new department would be first, figure out how to do that, and then say, we as a city are ready. We know what we need to do, we're starting to build the capacity, and we can execute on a plan that's complete. Right now, to use a transportation metaphor, it's a little cart before the horse. And I see Alderman Cohn wants to say something, so I will wrap up there.
All right.
And just express that those are
I indulge you with a few
the
extra time.
the reservations I think many people
All right.
feel, despite I think having a lot of sympathy with
Okay.
the intent.
Well, quickly, instead of
Thank
going through, does anyone have any questions of Mr. Ogilvy? None? Okay. Alderman Clark Hubbard, please proceed.
Thank you. I was hoping that you would speak today, Mr. Ogilvy, especially since you've been on both sides of this, right? You've been in our seat and now you're in that seat. So your perspective was really helpful for me. And I was just going to ask you the same question that I asked Director Williams about the time, which you already spoke to. But what amount of time do you think would add or help in this process?
Yeah, I'm very reluctant just to throw a year out there because I think so much depends on what happens after today in the interim, so much that staff is not in control of. So those are budget things. The other ordinances are being talked about. I tend to think what would be most helpful is at least knowing what those things are going to be. And today we don't know what all those things are going to be. We don't know how many staff to hire. We don't know where to put them. we haven't started the new, whatever these new programs are, we haven't even sort of assessed like, would existing staff want to move over? I mean, those might be like really important questions to know before taking this, making this change. And I think some of the specifics in this proposal are very important. So it's a charter change. It gets fixed. It gets very hard to change. So are we sure we want this division in charge of like coordinating on public transit? I mean, the Board of Public Service, even with this, the Board of Public Service is still the permitting agency for everything that happens in the right-of-way. That's still a responsibility they would have that this doesn't change. And so we still have that dichotomy of, well, the Streets Department is supposed to do the planning now, Transportation Department, but Board of Public Service would ultimately still permit like Green Line construction. That still goes through a separate department. So we haven't completely unified anything. In fact, Board of Public Service would still have to permit all the work done by this Transportation Department because that's still their responsibility in the charter. BPS is in charge of all improvements in the right-of-way, and this doesn't actually change that. So that was a long-winded answer to how much more time. I think there's a time aspect, but there's also an assessment aspect that we haven't gotten to yet, although we are kind of in the midst of that with the transportation and mobility plan.
Thank you, and thank you again for your perspective. I know that it's valuable to us as a body because we understand, and again, you've been on both sides of this role, and when we're standing in front of our constituents and trying to explain something to them, I know for myself, I don't get any kind of excitement or joy out of almost gaslighting them to think that one thing is going to do something that I know it might not do or it's not going to do. And so being real with my constituents is the pathway that I always like to go down, and truthful, even when it's not what they want to hear and even when they're not happy with me. And so I appreciate you lending that information so that I can carry it back. I know that I don't know if when you serve, but I know in past administrations, some of this activity was in the Board of Public Service, like before it became consultant work, before they outsourced it, these were positions that were in the Board of Public Service. Was that when you were in office, or did it change while you were in office?
Yeah, so I started in 2011, and both the Streets Department and the Board of Public Service have fewer staff than they had at that time. So the trend has been down, unfortunately, and the people who are there right now are working very hard, I can say from firsthand experience, to make sure all the projects we have on our plate right now are completed. And so I think the question really gets to capacity, right? Can we, whoever we want to do these functions, I think there's largely consensus on safety, better maintenance, all these things. Can we build that capacity into a department so that it can achieve what those shared goals are? And so we could start there with capacity.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Mr. Ogilvy? Your excuse, sir. Okay.
There's people online to speak.
We have, how many speakers do we have online?
Tracy, she's looking. We at least have one person online right now.
Okay. Are we connecting them?
His name is Austin.
All right, sir, can you hear us?
I'm not showing Austin right now. That's not him, but he's online to speak as well.
Hello?
Are you here to speak on Board Bill 61, the Department of Transportation bill, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And your name is Alec Belcher?
That's correct.
Okay, what we're going to do is you're going to raise your right hand. We're going to swear you in. After that, you will state your name. You'll have 3 minutes. And do you swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, state your name and please proceed for 3 minutes.
Hello. My name is Alec Belcher, and I live in Dogtown, Ward 4. I support Board Bill 61 because I think St. Louis needs a Department of Transportation. As it stands, the streets of St. Louis do not prioritize the lives of pedestrians, cyclists, and people with disabilities. We have little unifying or guiding philosophy for planning a safer, walkable, bikeable, and transitable city. Fixing this problem requires systemic change in our city government. Thus, we need a department that is not only responsible for maintenance, but also planning safe and complete streets, because these responsibilities are inextricable. I understand that the current streets department is underfunded, and I fully sympathize with that. We don't want our future Department of Transportation to be underfunded or disorganized either, but I also know that quick build traffic calming solutions can be very cheap and simple. For example, Alderman Browning showed us the DIY traffic circle made by citizens with paint and posts. I hope that giving a department the ability to plan will help us streamline the deployment of these quick build traffic calming measures under a more comprehensive and guiding philosophy of the Department of Transportation, as opposed to relying on the current system of using ward capital. Thank you, that's all.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Anyone else lined up on the line, or?
Yes, we have one more, I believe. Austin?
All right,
Austin
sir,
Smith?
can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What we're going to do is swear you in. You will then state your name for the record, and we'll have 3 minutes to state your case. Do you swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
All right, start whenever you please. So please state your name first, though.
Sure. My name is Austin Smith. I'm a resident in Ward 9, and I support this bill. I spent the last 5 years as a local startup CEO. A common routine for me would be to walk to the Cortex Metro stop and then take the Metro to my office downtown. I'm also the father of a 2-year-old. It bothers me that it feels dangerous to get to my office dodging potholes or cars. It bothers me that I feel like I had to get a bigger car in the city to protect my kid from possible accidents or unsafe streets. I think it's clear that funding is a massive missing piece, but if I've learned anything in my time from being a leader, I think that clearly stating a purpose of a team, of a role, or of a project is a very powerful part of the equation to achieving goals. I think many people here agree that the goal of creating a safer experience in city streets is noble, is what we all want. And I think it's more likely to happen if we change a department and name this department and state this purpose under the department, as opposed to what it is stated from 1914. So I believe that restating the name and, more importantly, restating the purpose allows me as a citizen to understand that there are people in my city who want me and my kid to be safe on our streets. I believe that it gives the proper structure for the city to continue to improve and add these additional policies that Alderman Browning spoke about before, and to continue to support this stated mission. And I think this can be done in the time frame set forth, and it's important to act sooner rather than later. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you very much. All right, does that conclude our digital testimony?
Yes. Sorry.
No worries. All right, if you would like to do a closing statement today, and we'll, as I say, we'll hold all our voting till next Wednesday for our big meeting, and get all the information we can today and go over some of the things we discussed in the meantime. Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to take some time to respond to some of the points that were brought up. A lot of these points were brought up in discussions we've had previously with the departments and the administration. And the reason I've decided to proceed with this bill, despite those concerns, is that I agree with the speakers today. I agree with people that say that it's important that we set a goal for ourselves. It's important that we set what we want this streets department to become. Because without that, we can see that we will just continue to kick the can down the road. So first, I want to address budget. I acknowledge that this will be a sticking point, and we will work to get funds through Ward Capital, St. Louis Works, and the budget process to make sure that this can really happen. It will not happen, though, with our current system, so we have to address it. We have no choice. Staffing. I think that it's really important to make sure that this department has staffing. It kept getting brought up that I was going to, we want to take people from BPS, and I'm not sure where that came from because I'm not talking about that. I think we do need to give the street department its own planning division so that they have people who are out there doing this work. I don't know if anyone, some of you are on the budget committee. You were here when streets presented earlier this year. You heard our streets commissioner, Kent Flake, say that they haven't done a street audit since 2014. That's 10 years ago that they haven't done that. And he said we could do one if we just had one person and they could get it done in 3 months. So yeah, I think a planning division and within the street department could make almost an immediate difference in their ability to handle our streets and actually address where the problems are. We also talked about a compensation study. I'm excited to see the results of that. I think that's absolutely part of this as well. When we are asking people to come over from another city, because that's essentially what we're asking when we say we want 3 previous years of civil engineering experience, where else are you going to get 3 years of civil engineering experience in this specific field other than working for a Department of Transportation or a streets department or a public works department in a city? So we're asking people to come over with their engineering degree and 3 years civil engineering experience, and then we're going to pay them much less. That's why we can't hire people. It's very, very simple. But I'm really interested in seeing what this compensation study says. Surely it will be completed within the next 2.5 years, and I would think that that would be a big part of making sure that this department can be staffed out. These are things that can be added to the department after we pass this. It doesn't need to all happen at once, but there's things that the department currently has charged for in the charter right now that it does not do, like the sprinkling of streets. That's in reference to when our roads were dirt and we actually sprinkled water on them so they weren't so dusty. I want to make sure that we take the next couple years to really address those needs, but right now I think the system we have is failing to address those needs in the department. I want to address the bicycle pedestrian coordinator real quick. They've had multiple applicants to this position. You might know some of the names. I'm not going to say the person's names out loud for their privacy's sake, but what I will say is these people who we refused to hire to be the bike pedestrian coordinator because they weren't qualified enough are then the same people that we contract out to with the TMP and Lockmuir Group. So we are telling people you're not qualified enough to work for our city, but then we go and we pay them more money through a contract to go do that same work. So there's something very broken about that system right now. So I would absolutely welcome a study looking at why we're asking for the qualifications we are and if we can get these jobs done with different qualifications. Let's speak to timing a little bit. There's support now for this. People are asking for this now. And this is a first step. There's a 2.5-year timeline. I want to mention that I did offer the administration a 2029 date when we were having these discussions previously, and they declined. So I view the offer today as nothing but moving the posts. And when we don't act, we are accepting the results on our streets every year that this goes on. Think back to last week, the presentation I showed you a slide with a bunch of numbers on it. Those are the numbers every year. So if we want to kick it down the road 2 more years, expect twice that number. It's not acceptable to me. I think a timeline here makes sense in making sure that we are providing the motivation, because what we need to do here is possible within 2.5 years. We just have to set our sights on it. And then finally, there's always a project going on. There's always a plan being developed. This is St. Louis. We are familiar with this. But a plan is only a plan. It has to be implemented. And I have spoken with people on the TMP team about their plans and what they're looking at. My understanding is they are going to be making ordinance recommendations, so nothing having to do with structure. And they plan to be done by May 2025. That would leave us a full 2 years to take those recommendations into law. So again, fits within the timeline. I imagine the compensation study would fit in the timeline as well. And the TMP is exciting, but it's not going to fix everything, just like no other plan has fixed everything. Finally, I'll talk about structure. It should not take 3 departments to do something on our streets. Even then, we contract most things out. I had a meeting last week where we went and walked a road in our ward, and it had someone from streets, someone from planning, and 2 people from BPS in the meeting. We were trying to look at traffic calming. Does anyone want to take a guess at what we decided to do at the end of the day? A traffic study. So even then, we had the whole team with us, and we still couldn't do anything. We were going to defer out and do a traffic study, push the result back another. I want to just conclude by saying that, the language in this bill allows for continued collaboration with BPS. That doesn't change. Look at page 3, line 9. It refers to section 5. We're not taking anything from BPS. We looked at that. We determined it was going to be too big of a problem. We want to keep that structure in place for now. So anything that Streets feels like they cannot get done, even after they become the Department of Transportation, even 2.5 years from now, there can still be room for improvement. We tried to make the language flexible so that this can continue to grow, understanding though that the charter is our goal. But we have to look at the condition of our streets right now and the system as it exists right now. It's not working. I liked what Director Williams said about what she would do if this passes. That's the goal. We want to try to build this out. And those are the actions we should take. I think we're on the same page there. But we aren't special in St. Louis. We are, however, unique. The results are out on our streets. We walk them, we bike them, we drive them every day. We see how our current structure works and how it doesn't. So this is the first step. It's setting what we want to see while we work to achieve it. The language is written to adapt and grow, but I want to make sure that we take this step to move forward. And I actually would like to ask for a vote today. So if you have any more questions for me, please do ask them now. But I think that this is something that does not need to have further exploration. We've had a chance to hear from the departments, which I'm very glad we've had a chance to do that. But I do think that this is something that we need to see action on, and there's no need to go back.
Well, my plan next week would not to have any further explanation. I think we would just deliberate, and I would actually just take a vote next week is what I plan on doing. There'll be no further discussion. There'll be no further speakers. I believe that as these were presented to us as a multitude of charter changes, I would like to have them all voted on at the same time to go out for a charter change in mass. So we have 2 more bills to hear today. We have 2 to hear next week, which I hope will be shorter than this. And at the end of next week's meeting, we will vote on everything before us, and that will present us with a proliferation of things that will or will not be going to the full board to change the charter. I appreciate all the input and all the thing, but I would, there's no need for anyone else to speak on this, but I would like to take the time of the week. Again, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, these are large changes we're, putting forth, because these are things we're going to be putting on the ballot for people to decide. So at that point, I believe I, as chairman, will have a wonderful vote time next Wednesday. Okay?
Well, thank you for that clarification. That explanation makes sense to me, and I'm happy to wait a week with that in mind. Before I step down, I do want to ask can we acknowledge any letters of support or opposition that we received?
We did receive 9 letters in support.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So that's what I'll finish with. This is something that I think our community expects us to do. It's something that I think they're looking for results, and I look forward to addressing you next week.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
since you're not going to allow any more conversation, I would like to ask for the public, since he noted it in his comments, and to make sure, since they are in the room, if there's any response, one about that 2029 date and what the rejection was on that. And I also noted that President Green said that she had some closing remarks, I think. If this is going to be our
She'd
last.
like to speak on everything.
Yeah.
Well, when he got back
Okay,
up.
all right. Okay, if you're finished, are you requiring any response from Alderman Browning, or you just want to speak in general? Or just saying if you wanted to sit down or
Just
not.
wanted to say a few comments with regard to this bill in particular, and kind of piggybacking off of some of your earlier comments, if that would be all right. First off, I want to thank Alderman Browning for your work on this. We all know this is something that we've heard a lot about from the public through the Charter Commission, and folks over the years of wanting to see more consolidation in our city. We have a lot of city departments that various tasks are dispersed in different areas, and it doesn't necessarily make sense. Housing is another place. The reason that the zoning department is not with the planning department continues to not make sense to me. And I do think that this is a priority that warrants going to the ballot. Just want to make a few things clear that in 2023, St. Louis residents voted to establish a citizen-led charter commission to review and update our charter that was created in 1914, before women had the right to vote, before Black folks had the right to vote, before anybody besides white men had the right to vote. And I think that is very important. Over the past 11 months, the Charter Commission has conducted an immense amount of research, held more than 60 public meetings. And I want to thank not just the members of the Charter Commission, but also members of the Board of Aldermen, many of whom spent countless hours meeting with the Charter Commission, attending those meetings, providing feedback throughout the process, and not waiting until the 11th hour to come through with feedback or recommendations. I also want to make it clear that the recommendations of the Charter Commission should go before the people of the City of St. Louis on the November ballot, as was the intention of this process that was approved by voters of our city. And that the final recommendations were never intended to have to come through this body when this was initially passed through the Board of Aldermen and approved by the voters. And the only reason they are coming through us today is because of a lawsuit filed by a group that continues to try to halt any process in St. Louis. Just last week, that same group sued our city to stop our guaranteed basic income pilot. The board's role should be to work in collaboration with the Charter Commission to refine language, get it ready for the ballot while maintaining the spirit of the recommendations of the commission, but not to block the commission's recommendations from making it to the people. We need to be a conduit, not a gatekeeper. And I think that Alderman Browning's work on this bill demonstrates that that spirit of working in collaboration with the Charter Commission to refine some of the language and get this to a place where it still meets the spirit of what the Charter Commission heard over their 60 meetings, and it deserves to go forward. The process began with the people's vote to approve the commission, and it needs to conclude with the people's vote on November 5th. I think those of us at the Board of Aldermen also know that change is hard and scary. The Board of Aldermen, we just went through our own dramatic changes not too long ago, cutting ourselves in half without a plan. When that was approved, the only thing it said is that we shall reduce on this date. And it gave no roadmap for how to get there, no roadmap for salaries or staffing or any of the nuts and bolts to actually make that work. We had to do that work. We had to look at that as the roadmap in the future and backwards plan from there the things that we needed to get in place as a Board of Aldermen ready for that change. I think oftentimes, through no fault of our own in city government, we are so busy putting out fires that we don't often prioritize the structural changes that could make it so that we have less fires to put out in the first place. And so I just want to be clear that, if Alderman wants a vote today, I support a vote today. My understanding is the chair does not want to move things forward. My hope is that we're not here for another, 8 hours next Wednesday too, going through all of these, because I do at this point in time think that Board Bill 61 committee substitute as amended is at a place where, while there may be some minor tweaks on the floor of the Board of Aldermen, I think ultimately this bill does meet the spirit of what the Charter Commission has asked for and is in ballot ready or near ballot ready condition to be able to move forward. So thank you for your work on this. I know it was a lot of hours over a truncated period of time, but definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, President Green. I agree with everything you said and appreciate the points you've made. And I would reiterate that I'm fine with the plan as it is if we are taking a vote next week. I just want to make sure that we are moving things ahead on a good timeline. After all, we are all supposed to be on recess right now. But I think we've all been at City Hall more than we usually are working on this stuff. So that's absolutely correct. This is about that structural change that makes it so we have fewer fires. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Alderman Browning, and thank you for all your hard work. And thank you for your comments, Madam President. As you know, I'm the biggest fan of brevity and short meetings that there is in the world. But as I stated at the beginning, this is something I believe that we will take everything we can in, which we have on this, and I will, due to the, I guess, the unique nature of this, try and vote everything out at one time just for maybe the regality of it all. How is that?
That is fine. As long as we're cutting it very close with Wednesday being the last meeting.
Due to the fact we have to have a meeting next week is the reason I'm doing it.
Okay.
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 That if we could have admonished and not have a meeting next week, but we have to have it. So
Okay.
at that point, let's have some fun.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
We have different definitions.
Okay,
of
make it quick because you're next.
Yes,
I'm going to cut short because we're going to not hear.
Yes. All right. My one comment is for Director Williams. If we could get, since we are waiting for a vote, if we could get an actual date for when, or proposed date when the compensation study is going to be due, I would like to see that before. I think it's important if we're talking about adjusting timelines based on that to understand what the timeline actually is. The compensation study? Oh, I can request that. Yes, and we'd like to have it, to know that before our
If you could just have it emailed to all the members of the committee. I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. At this point, we will keep 61 on hold for a vote next week, and we will move on to Board Bill 72 to accommodate our wonderful collector of revenue who's here to speak on that particular item.
Yes, we have also Comptroller Green here as well.
We first need to introduce this particular Board Bill number 72 is where we're going. I don't know if 72 first is what we agreed upon with yourself. I thought you asked me first. So please approach the dais and you're.
Try to, much as it here, I'm also a fan of brevity. Probably doesn't seem like it after all these hearings.
We're hoping to hit happy hour by 5, so let's go.
All right, folks. We've got a committee substitute in for Board Bill 72. We heard about it last week, so I'm just going to go through some level changes. So if you move to the next slide. Basically, what we did with the committee substitute, can we go to slide 2, who's ever managing that? All right, well, I'll just talk through slide 2. Basically, we did a little carve out about what would, so the bill is to, in the charter, there's a $500 cap for fees and fines. That was last updated in 1970. Obviously, inflation and the financial, that's not accurate. That would have been about $4,000 in today's dollars. And given all the conversations about trying to make sure that we can enforce derelict landlords and folks who are not that they can't afford it, but who are not operating and have no intent to operate in the spirit of the law. So can we go to the next slide, please? So the key changes in this committee substitute is you'll see several whereas clauses to talk about the vacancy problem, because that's really what we're trying to focus on. And again, it narrowly tailors the fees to focus on the preservation and protection of environmental conditions in the city that to prevent the harm and health and safety and comfort of residents, specifically around property issues, the unauthorized dumping of waste and debris, prohibited refuse, waste tire disposal, unpermitted demolitions, vacant property, or non-owner occupied deteriorated property. And we also adjusted the ballot language. This was in direct response to some concerns we received from different groups that wanted to make sure that we weren't basically trying to criminalize poverty or really hurt people who can't afford these fines. And that, again, is what we're not trying to do. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So you can see the ballot this is the adjustment of what charter, and it says some of that language that I earlier. And next slide, please. Okay, well, I will read the next slide. The ballot language is as follows. In order to make the city of St. Louis more effective in the enforcement of laws pertaining to vacant and deteriorated property and better protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents, shall the city of St. Louis charter be amended to add an exception to the $500 maximum fines for ordinances relating to vacant and non-owner occupied deteriorated property. So essentially, we just wanted to tailor it to make sure that we're not criminalizing people who can't afford it. And with that, Chairman, my part of the presentation is done. I'm open for questions. I know we have a couple of people who'd like to speak.
I would probably, because we went over pretty much of this last week with you, I would just like to hear from Mr. Collector. Mr. Daly, if you'd like to approach the dais and we'll hear your testimony. If you would, sir, I know we can trust you, but for the record, will you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name for the record and please proceed.
My name is Greg Daly. I am the Collector of Revenue for the City of St. Louis. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to address the Legislation Committee here this morning and this afternoon, and I stand in support of repealing the cap on the municipal fines. The Collector of Revenue is involved with the vacancy initiative as well as the RETAF program. And ladies and gentlemen, it is time to hold problem property owners accountable. I love our city. I know that everybody on this committee loves this city, but we've got a couple of knuckleheads that own property in the city, and we have got to get their attention. You as aldermen, you are getting phone calls, you are getting emails, and it's about a piece of property that is not being kept up. And I think what happens in a lot of cases, it's just cheaper to take the fine than it is to cut the grass, than it is to demolish the building. So these are things that I think we need to be cognizant of and be aware of the fact that there are just people that we need to get their attention sooner than later. The longer it goes, the worse they get. So with some of the things that I think we're all doing or trying to do here in the city, we need a hammer. And the hammer is, if you don't do this, you're going to be fined. And again, it might sound a little bit of a rough shot, but that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with individuals who are playing the system. And if they continue to play the system, all they're doing is laughing at us and taking advantage of loopholes and taking advantage of situations that are around. I would suggest that forestry, the building division, I would suggest that when this does become part of how we're going to continue, how we're going to start doing business, I would suggest that forestry and building be a little bit more aware and start sending notices out faster and let these people know that the fines are accumulating. These bills come out on real estate taxes, and the sooner that we can get people's attention and let them know that they are behind on the taxes, I think it serves both us as well as them. So I stand here this afternoon, and I appreciate the opportunity to let this committee know that I think that this particular piece of legislation is really good for the city. I know it goes right at it, and I know it hits everybody in their pocket, but sometimes that's the best way to get everybody's attention. And as the collector of revenue, I can assure you that getting people's attention is so important. I sit down there in the office every 3 years. If you don't pay your taxes in 3 years, then you're subject to sale of property. Well, that takes, another 6 months or 7 months. I cannot begin to tell you how often you get the phone call or you get the person who comes in at 4:45 the day before their property is going to be sold and want to be heard, want to pay their property off. I mean, these are things that, it just amazes me every day. And I think that you as legislators, myself as an office holder, we have got to, again, get everybody's attention. So I'll be more than glad to answer any questions at this time.
All right, with that, does anyone have any questions of Daly? I see none. No, I agree with everything you say, sir. I thank you for your comments. Thank you for your time. Alderman, you have another speaker? Be careful, some are chilly, some are not.
Peter Hoffman is online.
Yeah, just don't sneeze.
Are they stopping because of?
You didn't bring us any chicken.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes. What we're going to do is, if you can hear us, we're going to swear you in, sir. If you would raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay, please state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Hoffman. I reside in the city and I manage a program at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri that provides free legal help to disinvested city neighborhoods. Here testifying in support of Board Bill 72, which could allow some very narrow exceptions to the city's cap on fines and fees for ordinance violations relating to vacant and deteriorated property and illegal demolitions. I mentioned this last week, but each day my organization receives dozens of calls from residents dealing with housing issues, from tenants whose apartments do not meet minimum habitability requirements, to homeowners who have been forced to live next to dangerous and collapsing buildings. And seldom are these owners of these properties small individuals or mom and pops. They are instead increasingly large corporations, national corporations, and LLCs. And these fines are just too low to deter the illegal behavior and protect the public's health, safety, and well-being. As the collector said, the flagrant abuses of the housing code are really just seen as a cost of doing business for a lot of these owners. The city's inability to enforce its ordinances with respect to those who have the most wealth and privilege, I think, shakes confidence in local government's ability to deal with the inequities of code enforcement. Essentially, we are giving the large and most powerful immunity from having to pay fines. It's just a cost of business for them. I think we're also losing some opportunities to grow and enhance equity in our code enforcement. If the Board of Aldermen is allowed to increase fines, that could lead to more effective code compliance, that could allow for strengthened diversion programs, expanded home repair services for those truly in need, all at the expense of those who are persistently and egregiously violating the law. Increased funds could also be used to expand training opportunities for staff on equitable code enforcement practices. I know the Board of Aldermen has taken great steps in recent years to improve the rights of the poor and the underserved. These efforts, like the city's rental registration system, for example, can only be truly effective if there are mechanisms in place to enforce it. I want to be clear that I am not here to testify in favor of increasing any specific fine or fee. That should be the conversation for future debate. But what I do support is asking voters to remove this difficult barrier return this tool of effective governance to our elected officials. And so therefore, I'm speaking in support of Board Bill 72. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Very well said. Thank you. All right.
Two questions. There is a committee substitute. Would you like me to formally adopt the committee substitute? We skipped that step.
We all have a copy before us?
You should have a copy and it's in the drive.
Got one.
71, 70,
It's on your desk.
and 61.
72.
The end of your pile.
There it is, hiding, it's 71, 71, 71. I got 3 71s in front of me. Somebody may,
Yeah, I got 3 too.
you have a 72. Committee substitute?
I got 3 too.
Okay.
Oh.
All right, that's close enough for me. We can figure it out from there. Thank you. Please proceed.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt committee substitute for Board Bill 72.
So move. Or I make a motion, we adopt committee substitute to Board Bill 72.
Previous roll?
You can't ask for previous role.
Previous roll.
Hearing no objection to previous role, you may proceed, Alderwoman.
Secondly, this is not a core charter recommendation from the commission, so I would ask for consideration that we take a vote on this. I understand that you don't want to take votes on some of the other bills, but this is not one of the core recommendations. It was born out of public comment, and certainly it has support, but it is not part of that set.
No, we're going to have some fun next week. It's going to be a nice, quick meeting. Then we'll have a big party.
In your office?
Yes.
All right, well, with that, that concludes my presentation, and we'll be back here
Everyone, thank you.
next week, and I'm just going to stay up here for 71.
All right, with that, we'll proceed with number 71. Do you have any speakers? Because we had
I do have one speaker online, and I also have a committee substitute, so would you like to go?
Let's go with the committee substitute first, and I believe,
I actually have an amendment with the committee substitute.
so we need the committee substitute, then the amendment for the committee substitute? Is
Yes, so I make a
Well,
motion
no,
to,
you can't make the motion. I'll entertain a motion for committee substitute for number Bill 72.
I'll make a motion to adopt committee substitute of Board Bill 71.
71, yes.
Or 70.
71.
71, okay.
Second.
Previous roll.
Hearing no objection to previous roll, please proceed, Alderwoman.
great. I would also, there should be Amendment 1 in the drive to Board Bill 71, and Amendment number 1. It amends the Board Bill, page 3, line 11 to page 3, line 11 as follows. After the words of civilian oversight, it's inserting the following words, and it's boards. Basically, we made an error if you look at the marked up version, so look at the clean version, we want to make sure to include civilian oversight and its boards in that.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion for the amendment.
I move that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 71.
Committee substitute.
Committee substitute.
Second. Previous roll.
Hearing no objection, the amendment has been adopted to Board Bill 72. Committee substitute, please proceed.
Great. If whoever's opening the slide want to move to the second slide. Here last week, you had a very robust committee hearing and discussion, but this bill is one of the 5 core Charter Commission recommendations to create an Office of Public Advocate.
We're hearing it now.
So if we could actually move to slide 4, please.
Next week. This one's going.
So I'm going very quickly. I just want to go over the high-level changes that we made in the committee substitute. We basically eliminated, actually, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. We narrowed the language in the bill to be more appropriate for charter changes. We clarified that the Office of Public Advocate duties are not redundant with other executive offices, so you'll see for financial audits to not conflict with the comptroller's duties. It updates the bill language to best practices for the Board of Elections, e.g. there's some language around there just regarding that we needed to change. And it also added a fiscal note. I know there was conversation last week. The original estimate put it at $5 million. We said something about $1.60 per person. The fiscal note is in the copy of the bill. We looked at sort of equivalent salaries in offices, and the first year estimates is $673,000. That's about $28,000 in startup costs, new computers, office supplies, things like that, and the annual cost would be about $641,000. So it's quite a marked difference from the original $5 million that was being discussed. So if we could go back to the previous slide, please. And just want to kind of do an overview of what the Office of Public Advocate's role would be, or what they would do. They would audit for operational accountability. So thinking about our departments, are there different ways that we could operate more efficiently? They can receive, investigate, and take action on complaints related to city services, issue reports on said investigations. They can also initiate reports. One of the biggest things that I think that we've heard, I know this is not the Public Safety Committee, but one of the things we have heard on the Public Safety Committee is just about the Civilian Oversight Board and the DFOB, the Detention Facility Oversight Board, being able to do its job efficiently. So with the Office of Public Advocate, it would move the Division of Civilian Oversight and all of the things it's over, e.g. those boards, under the Office of Public Advocate, and the OPA would house, provide staff assistance, legal counsel, and monitor the Division of Oversight and those boards. And then it would serve, the Office of Public Advocate would serve as the city's custodian of records. So with that, I'm trying to stick to as much brevity as I can, Mr. Chairman. Any questions, or you just want to pop it over to public comment?
Well, do you have a public?
We do have, I think, hopefully Scott and Tagliata should be online.
We have one in person as well. We have Mr. Chris Grant here. Did he speak
had to
out?
hop out.
Okay.
Okay, because I believe Madam Comptroller is here to speak, so after your speaker, we'll let Madam Comptroller speak. So you have someone online, or is out of here?
While we're waiting for that, Scott and Tagliata.
Okay, he's not online? Okay. At this point, Madam Comptroller, if you are here to speak on number 71, we'll let you approach the dais. Unfortunately, you'll have to swear in again. It doesn't hold over from week to week. I'm too technical. Raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please state your name and please proceed.
Darlene Green, Comptroller of City of St. Louis, and thank you. Thank you for that, Alderman. I appreciate it. I wanted to first off by saying thank you to the chairman, and as well as all of the committee for being here and for hearing from us on all these important issues. These are very important issues that we're asking to go before the voters. And I don't want to minimize that. And I don't want to minimize the hard work of the commission. The Charter Commission did a lot of hard work for a lot of hours, a lot of research, and they heard from quite a few people, read a lot of reports, and so our people deserve to know that. And my department, Office of the Comptroller, we've reviewed and we have looked at what would be going before the voters, because what we want to make sure of is that what we're putting before the voters would be what's in the best interest of the city of St. Louis. And I think with the deliberations that we go through, that we can help to determine whether or not it's in the city's best interest before the voters would have an opportunity to see. Otherwise, then why would we be putting it before the voters if it's not in their best interest? So I wanted to make that point. Jason Fletcher in my office did remind me of that just today. And so I want to thank Jason, is because, you know, we are all public service servants who work for and on behalf of the citizens of the city. We work for them, we work on behalf of them, and Alderwoman Hubbard mentioned that whatever the outcome is, she is responsible to her constituency to deliver what these deliberations become, and I have to take that same stand. Board Bill 71 continues to be a part of a package that changes the structure of the city's financial structure that causes concern, coupled with Board Bill 30, to what the city's credit shall be if in fact it passes. So this proposed charter change, along with Board Bill 30, does have considerable, causes our department considerable pause, the Department of the Comptroller. So I wanted to renew my opposition that was stated last week. I also want to acknowledge that when I stated that we were going to be, and we were evaluated by a credit rating agency as to what our credit shall be, we were actually evaluated last Wednesday, which was after this meeting, and on Thursday we found out that our credit rating was indeed upgraded. And upgraded on the current policies, budgeting policy that we have now. I am very pleased to announce that we were upgraded to an AA credit by the Fitch Credit Rating Agency. And we know that we have not been a AA credit in the last several years, at least 30 plus, but we did achieve a AA minus in 2010, and we were almost there. Several things happened within our city, within our economy, because we have economically sensitive revenues that we deal with. We have population loss that we deal with. So I took time to put some figures together for you, and I passed out the city population and credit ratings that you should have for the city of St. Louis. Of course, our population as of 2022 is 286,000, and I'm reporting to you that we have a AA credit with Fitch, and I'm reporting also the credit ratings that we have with Moody's and S&P as well. Last week, we were asked to compare Kansas City by the Honorable Alder Lady who's sponsoring this bill, to compare Kansas City, Missouri. And their population, as opposed to our population, is double. They are 509, roughly double, 509,000 population as of 2022. And their credit rating, as affirmed as of March of 2023, is a AA minus, which is not as good as what we've achieved, even though they have a higher population. That goes to what is the work, what is the evidence that we can see that helps the city of St. Louis with such a much lower population? What are we doing right in the city? And that is that we have good internal controls. We have internal controls in our budgeting process that allow us to protect taxpayers' dollars and in turn protect the city's credit. What that means is when we have a control like asking that the board who wishes, the Honorable Board of Aldermen who wish to add to the budget on an annual basis, we want to add an item. Then what we do is we say, yes, let us get the approval of the Board of E&A in order to do that. That's an internal control. That's what agencies look for when they're evaluating the city's credit. What was in the report for the upgrade, which the report that upgraded the city to a AA talked about what it is that the city has that helped us to achieve the upgrade, and that's resilience. We earned a AAA in our resilience to maintain good budgeting practices and good financial practices. And I think that's important to note that we are doing the right thing, and that is a good thing that is going on in the city. Good budgeting practices, we have that. And I would think that since we know that good credit is going to allow us to have lower borrowing costs, in other words, not cost taxpayers more money, then we don't want to mess with that. Bad credit, damaged credit, we all know costs more to borrow. It'll cost us more to borrow. So I wanted to reiterate those kinds of things. And with regard to Board Bill 71, you've heard that it would create a new office, and that is more bureaucracy. You've heard that even with the committee substitutes, that the new office would hire legal counsel, not only for the office that's being created, but also for another office, as well as the board of another office, the oversight board, as well as the oversight board's office, as well as the board. That's in writing. What also you have to learn is that even though there's a fiscal note, the fiscal note has not been shared with the administration. I have not received a copy of the fiscal note to understand how the costs have come about. Fiscal notes normally either at or asked for from the comptroller or the budget director. And I'm not sure in this case whether it was the budget director who was given this fiscal note. I'm not sure, but I just heard it reported just now that there's a fiscal note. So I will be interested in seeing that. I respect each and every one of the aldermen on this committee and your challenges that you have to put this before the voters. It's not easy, but I must speak on Board Bill 71 as well as Board Bill 30, Mr. Chairman, even though that's Board Bill 30 has been passed, when I talk about what challenges the city's credit. And as I wrap up, good credit is what's good with the city. And if we do anything, and voters, our voters are smart. That's the other point I wanted to make. When you read the report, and if you choose to read the credit report, that's also in the credit report that talks about the education of our citizenry with the fact that we have the universities. So that's a good thing that we have in the city, along with the good credit. We know we have the weak population. We know we have the economically sensitive revenues, which also make the city weak. And we know that we do not have a population, I did say it was weak, but our population in our St. Louis County is 990,000 with the AAA credit rating in St. Louis County. But the city of St. Louis, with its good fiscal and budgeting policies, earned a AA for our citizens. And I believe that as a public servant in the city of St. Louis, that we all should be thinking about how can we make things better for the citizens of St. Louis. One last thing, and I'll go, and we were talking about Kansas City, Missouri earlier. Kansas City, Missouri is a city within a county, Jackson County, and Jackson County pays for the county offices. St. Louis City is a city that pays the expenses for all of the county offices. So we have to think about that. That when you compare St. Louis with other cities and talk about what is coming out of our operating budget differently than what comes out of the operating budget of a city like Kansas City, when we talk about adding more bureaucracy, which is what Board Bill 71 does, it adds a layer. We thought it was going to be $5 million. We're hearing now about it may not cost that much, but what we do know is still duplicating other office duties like auditing and other legal, as well as record retention, which is also, those are the three items that this particular board bill's public advocate says it will have in terms of duties. Those duties are already performed. And we did have the good fortune by the alder lady herself, who had as a witness the actual public advocate from New York, who actually answered the question as to what he would do with the complaint that would come in. And his response, as I recall, was that he knew people in different departments that he could contact. And if that didn't work to get the issue solved, that he would contact the media. And I thought that answer was to a point that we all need to know in terms of what it is that the public advocate would do, because I'm a public advocate on behalf of the citizens to protect their tax dollars. Each alderman, each one of you are public advocates on behalf of your constituency to protect the interests of the communities that you represent. So I just wanted to reiterate these comments that I made last week. Some are new, but the main one is let's protect what's good with the city. And that's the good credit that we have in the city of St. Louis based on good, strong fiscal policies that are already in place, and we would not want to harm any of that because our citizens deserve the best. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Controller, very, very much. All right, with that, I'll allow you to, do we have any other online testimony or any written testimony in regard to number 71? Online? Yep, that's a Board of Alderman answer, right? Yep. Okay. It's okay. We had it out the wazoo today, so yep's acceptable. Hello there, Scott. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, we're going to swear you in and then give you 3 minutes to state your case. Please state your name before you start talking. You swear the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. Scott
Please state your name
Intagliata.
and please proceed.
Scott Intagliata. Thank you. Thanks for all of your work on this, and again, the clear-headed deliberation of this committee and the entire board. I think it's important to stress that Board Bill 71 particularly is laid out by Alderwoman Velasquez, makes it pretty clear that we are not detracting from anything with the idea of adding a public advocate, that this would be an additive to the city. And there's plenty of good reasons for it. In my mind, it wouldn't keep any of the great fiscal practice that the comptroller just laid out, but it would add a set of, what seems to be needed public input and information that would be helpful. And again, I strongly encourage anybody to read the reports over the last 30 years in the city of New York, where the public advocate has examined with facts and figures substantial issues and problems in that city and come up with fact-based solutions to solve them. And they can get things done. They have the structural and political weight to get things done. And we just thought on the Charter Commission that that would be a benefit to the city. So, I'm happy to answer any questions, but it is as simple as that. It doesn't take anything away. It adds something, and it adds something that it seemed to us the citizens were looking for, which was a centralized place where they could go with a problem and have it addressed with urgency and real intent and follow-up.
All right, thank you
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Intagliata. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Intagliata while he's here? Seeing none, you're excused, or you can hang around for the excitement of the next 5 minutes. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Take care.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Alderman, you're ready to welcome to close. And what we will be doing next week is we have sharp presentations on 75 and 76 from the Alderman Cone. And then we will have a round of voting, be followed by the bonus round. No.
In closing, when we meet again here next week, we should bring some snacks. I'd love for the committee to consider what Scott Intagliata said, who was one of the charter commissioners, that I do believe that we owe it to the voters to honor the spirit of the Charter Commission. 60.4% of voters voted for the Charter Commission, and I think it is our duty to honor and recognize that in our decisions. So thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of this committee.
With that, I will consider all testimony on the bills we've heard, except for 75 and 76, closed unless there is an emergency and someone contacts me before next meeting.
Madam, or Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I please say one last thing with regard to this bill before we?
Madam President, please proceed.
Thank you. I just really quickly wanted to thank Alderwoman Velasquez the way that I did Alderman Browning. I think that over the last few weeks, she has worked in great collaboration with the Charter Commission, while also hearing concerns from community members to make sure that Board Bill 71 gets into a place that is creating a framework and not kind of micromanaging what an office could or could not look like, while still staying true to the intent of the Charter Commission. And so I wanted to give her props to that. And also just wanted for the record to also say that always great news when the city's credit rating increases. I do just want to call attention to page 2, paragraph 1 of the announcement that was the press release that was put out by the Fitch rating agency, which said that, quote, the upgrade of St. Louis's IDR and lease revenue bonds reflects the implementation of Fitch's new U.S. public finance local government rating criteria. And so it's not necessarily actions that we have done, but the upgrade at this point in time is a result of Fitch's new grading criteria. And I think it's always a good thing when our credit rating goes up, but I also just want to make sure that it's clear that at this point in time that went up because of the change in the rating scale.
We're not looking for testimony on this. She's just making a statement, if that's fine. It's because it's not pertinent to Board Bill 71. She's just making a statement as to what I'm only here to hear statements about board bills. And we're not here to discuss the city's credit rating. So if you have a...
President. Thank you.
Okay, but this is still my committee, and what we're doing is only pertinent to the board bills before us. Okay. Okay. All right, you're welcome. All testimony is closed on the board bills now. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, Madam Controller. At this point, as I said, We will have short testimony according to Alderman Cohn on Board Bill 75 and 76. Then we will take votes on all these things and knock them out and let the world find out how we feel about sending all these to the floor. I thank everyone for their time and their hard work and their understanding. This being the unique thing that it is why I'm tending to do this way rather than piecemeal a vote every now and then. I think if we're going to present these as one, we need to vote on them as one and have a little, it's a major change. Anytime you're looking at doing something with the charter, we should treat it that way. So with that, line item 5, resolutions for review. I need a drink. I'm getting tongue-tied. Yeah. Line item 6, committee discussions. We have none. We've acknowledged all written testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Any announcements? I will not allow any announcements. Thank you. Yeah. All aldermen were present. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second. Previous roll.
Objection.
Not really hearing an objection because I can't hear. Meeting is adjourned.